very slow. All right, we are live. Welcome to the 12 Cent
Whee!
Treehouse. A bit delayed by technical incompetence on my part tonight, but welcome
Me
as
too.
those of us in the sick ward talk
Yes.
about working in comics, TV, and film. I am Sean McLaughlin. I writer producer. I have a torn meniscus and bad allergies, and as always is Jeff Johnson. Jeff, would you like to tell us what your problems are and what you've done?
I'm Jeff Johnson.
I got you beat.
Yeah, I have damaged Achilles tendons and a possible bronchial infection. Scott, what about you?
Booyah!
Just allergies. Other than that, things are all right.
There you go.
And Stephen Jones.
I'd rather not share my weaknesses like Ned Stark. I don't like to fight in front of people unless it's for real.
Gotcha. Smart.
Of course that didn't work.
I would have gone for a Hitler reference, but the Ned Stark is really good too.
It didn't work out so well for Ned, though, did it?
Did not.
My dream is to write a medieval fantasy movie where Sean Bean lives till the end.
Oh, that sounds like a great. I mean, I don't know if Hollywood will buy that.
That's unheard of.
That's not the formula.
I remember reading the book the first time and being like, okay, so all the Night's Watch are gonna gallop in. Like I was writing it in my head of like, how do we get out of this set of Baelor, Baelor statue situation? Read the books for anyone that hasn't.
Yeah.
I read a book the other day called Germanica by Robert Conroy. It's an alternate history World War II thing. And it was like that, Steve. It was like I expected like a big bang up ending, and instead it was just the most anticlimactic thing ever. And I don't understand why people write things like that, but you can't argue with success.
I mean, I guess not.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Today's episode is brought to us by the lovely people at Puhoi Valley. Now, Puhoi Valley makes a delicious amount of dairy products, but my favorite, of course, is the Arabica. Someone who drinks a lot of coffee.
Arabica.
Say that word. Thank you.
Arabica.
Espresso. It's basically coffee and milks mixed together. Thank you, Puhoi Valley.
Okay.
Steve, could you hold that a little closer to the camera so everybody can see? There you go.
Now, if you want this fresh, you're going to have to take a minimum of a 12-hour flight to a country that doesn't exist. But hey.
I was going to say, Steve is, of course, the largest comic book influencer on Instagram in New Zealand.
In New Zealand, yeah.
Well, maybe non-born here, but maybe not. I don't know. But anyway, all right. So, 12 cent treehouse. Now marked down to 9 cents.
Yeah. So we were going to talk about Scott wanted to draw, and so he didn't want to be answering a lot of questions. So it's going to be a show about more of an animation vibe, and we're going to talk about the idea of why everything is a pan, and when your camera movement fundamentally. We're talking about camera movement.
Everything's a pan, yeah.
Yeah. Trucking, dolly, panning, and Sean, you know a lot more about the history of like where we get the name from, right? Like why it's called a pan.
I made that up, right?
Yes, I did. I thought you would just share it anyway, though.
The pan is actually named after an early cameraman named Pan Schwartz from the Silent Days, who not only did they name the pan after him, but he was the first one to use a metronome to time the hand cranking of the film so that we got to 24 frames per second. So that's all his. That's all his invention.
That's a beautiful bit of history right there. Yeah.
And the truck was invented by Isaac Hayes' grandfather, Truck Turner, who he made a blaxploitation movie of that name in honor of him. But he was actually an early African-American cameraman who invented the truck motion.
I mean, if we're going to talk about black
Boom.
exploitations, we should really talk about Black Belt Jones.
Well, true.
We're going to get
True.
into that.
That
we'll
was
save
Jim.
that.
That was Jim Kelly, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
My
we'll
personal favorite is 3 the Hard Way.
I haven't seen that one.
It's Jim Brown, Ken Norton, and Jim Kelly.
Oh, all right.
It's like the Defenders of the blaxploitation universe.
It's called 3 the Hard Way.
3 the Hard Way. 3 the Hard Way. With Vic
right.
Morrow.
Next Friday, Jeff.
Yep.
Yes.
Vic Morrow is the villain, and he's planning on poisoning the Detroit water supply with a poison that will only kill African Americans.
Oh, classic.
How have I not seen this movie?
Well,
so when I was a boy, and used to watch those from Canadian television in Buffalo. We got Canadian television, and Canadian television didn't edit out swear words or boobs. So
you Canadians are always so lucky.
Yet another reason that's such a fine country.
right.
Boobs on regular broadcast television. Who would have thought? And of course, you know, their system has collapsed since then because of that. But so panning and truck, why would you do it? I think that's always the big question. What drives me crazy is when they do it just for to take up time, or just because they can.
So when I was learning how to be so when you draw comics, as I'm sure everyone knows, right? I think one of the biggest differences, whenever I get asked about the difference between drawing comics and working in animation, for me the answer is just always
health insurance.
Yeah, well, I mean that's the best part. It's a free desk. I like that, but like it's how you move the camera around. Like when you're drawing a comic, all the camera movements are done in the gutter, right? They're suggested, right? They're all up in your head. Like it's just your imagination. Like
it's your damn eyes that have to do all the work.
Yeah, but when you do animation, you actually one of the ways you tell the story is how you move the camera, where you put the camera, what the relationship from one shot to the other is really affects, I think, the story. And there's a lot less interaction with the viewer. I mean, when you're reading a comic, you're doing a shit ton of the work because you're creating what's in between the panels in the gutter.
Right.
The viewer is doing that work in their head. Yes.
Yeah, but when you're watching a cartoon or a movie, all that stuff is being done by the storyteller, by the director or the storyboard artist. And when I was when I first started doing it, I didn't know how to make the leap from comic books to storyboards. And so a lot of my storytelling was basically comic book storytelling. So I left a lot of stuff out by accident, right? I left a lot out. So it took a while to learn. And when I started training on Transformers under our friend Shant, he said it'll take about 4 years, but then after that you'll understand how to do storyboards. And it took about like going to college. It took about 4 years, and like I learned how to not only move the camera but where to put it to get the right emotional response for the scene. And that took a long time. But like when it comes to panning, I always thought the pan in my mind was just always whenever you're moving the camera. Like if I'm tracking here and a guy's walking across the set, I'm panning along with them, or even up and down. I'll pan up or pan down. And then I know there's a difference between dollying and trucking, but I just always called it trucking because in my mind the camera was on a vehicle moving in and out. But that's that changed when we started doing more CG stuff, because then the camera movements were a lot more combined. Like you could push in, right? You could truck in and also pan at the same time. So you could slide. I always called it sliding. So you slide the camera up and turn it toward, like I always describe so much more like what the camera was doing as opposed to just using the shorthand for it.
Well,
Jones, did you feel the same thing?
Well, right. When you're everything that we're doing when we're moving the camera in animation, sometimes, like back when, Disney in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, they're putting things in front of but it was all simulating it was creating an animated version of what you could do with the camera in real life, right?
Yeah.
So if right now I'm looking at, I'm framing on you guys right now, say I'm a camera in real life. Well, one thing I can do is just tilt over where I'm just moving, the camera is moving, it's pivoting,
right.
but you can't do that in animation. You're simulating that, right? So then,
Right.
so to simulate that tilt, then you just have to you're dragging all of the drawings and everything. You're looking over to the right to simulate that the camera is tilting to the left, which is different than in a movie, where you're actually physically moving the camera.
Moving the camera. Right. So animation used to be shot on a flatbed camera. So the camera was facing down, it was on a flatbed. And to Steve's point, if you wanted to have a background move, you had, like, if you look at the old layouts for Animaniacs, or you look at the Hanna-Barbera backgrounds, they're huge. I mean, they're huge because you have to move that along the camera and to have the characters moving on top of it. With CG, you've already built that in most cases, especially if it's an existing location. So you can do whatever you want almost whatever you want with the camera.
Yeah, once we started moving into making cartoons in 3D, whether it be for film or TV, then you could really begin to simulate how the camera moves in real life. But when it was all 2D, there was just these analog ways of faking it. So in a CG animated shot, you can just tilt the camera over and pivot, or you can move it, And
so for just one thing, Steve, for the uninitiated, in general, a pan is when the camera is locked down, but the camera pivots up and down to the side by side. And a truck or a dolly is when the camera itself moves either way. And there's more specific terms, but that's in general.
Right. And trucking in is the whole camera is moving toward your subject, which is different from a zoom, which is you're just adjusting the lens to move in on your subject.
Right.
Because it changes the aspect ratio in the relationship between the focus of what's going on in the background and the foreground. So that, Jones, I never really there's some stuff I always pretended to understand, like
Sure.
like a BiPAC. Yeah.
Oh, you mean like a BiPAC shot? We need to have Dan Reba on the show as a guest, so he can more properly explain it, because he's the one that explained it to me. So I apologize to Dan Reba in advance. But I mean, like, you're saying like a BiPAC shot,
like the typical horror one, right?
Okay,
where you would push in.
Well, one I can think of, I'm sure that we did in Justice League or something like that, is like, say we've got like flying Superman in the foreground, right? Like say the camera's like right underneath Superman's chest. He's coming in from the top of the frame, and so we can see like his fist coming into frame and the different stuff. And then he's on one layer, sort of locked in with the camera. But then say we're trucking in on the background that he's zooming in on. That's a BiPAC. Isn't that right, Sean?
Right. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, it's all Hitchcock did it a lot, where you zoom and move and truck at the same time, and you get a very different. And it's usually a really good isolation effect for something.
Right, like it makes it really pulls focus to the subject and kind of warps the background a little bit.
Right.
I've mostly seen it like in horror stuff.
Yeah.
But now, I mean,
it's just
again,
unsettling.
Yeah.
It's a 2D animated technique, because in real life, you're actually just, like, you might have, it's your person that is actually on a rig with the camera as you're then moving in real life on the thing. And then I'm not sure if maybe people would use the terminology, but it wouldn't really be a BiPAC anymore if it's CG, because or maybe it still would. I mean, maybe you've basically just got your CG element locked on to with the camera while you're moving around in the CG environment,
Well, we still talk about frames and we still talk about footage, even though all that's out the window.
Right.
Sure.
But we don't talk about Ben Day anymore.
Yeah.
We sure, and we don't talk about. We don't. Talk
He
about
knows what
Bruno.
he did. Ben knows what he did.
I remember. I don't know if you remember all the code words, Steve, like for the water effect. When you would call for special effects, because
yeah.
it used to be like a warped glass thing that you would put
Yeah.
on top of the
Yeah.
drawing in front of the camera to give you this underwater effect. But we would just call for the glass effect, even though it wasn't done that way anymore, right?
I remember writing
My-
down DX a lot on storyboards when you're doing
Yeah.
double exposures for like
Yeah.
smoke or something.
Yep.
I remember writing N/S with an up and down arrow, like say if Superman was hovering, like north
Yeah.
south, like you
Not-
you.
Yeah, north and south.
To
Yeah.
give it some movement.
I remember
Yeah.
us watching a screening of Batman Beyond, Sean, I think, where Butch was calling out and making fun of the amount of rack focuses he used in a particular episode. So as we were watching it, he kept going, rack focus, like every
Yeah.
time to kind of call himself out. But it's a very effective technique, the rack focus.
Rack focus
Butch-
is a great
Butch-
one.
Butch would wake up in the morning. Butch was one of the directors, great director, great guy, and he would wake up one morning and go, "I think next episode I'm going to see how much rack focus I can get away with." You know.
Right.
He was just trying to keep it interesting for himself.
So, what makes you want to do that? Because I talked to Tokyo Movie Shinsho once, and they were showing me some stuff when I was over there, and there was
That's the world famous TMS studios that Sean
Yeah.
is referring to. One of the best animated studios in the world back, especially in the 90s.
But they were showing me something else they were working on, and there was this long pan at the beginning, like a lot of animes do that a lot. That just seems like to be part of their visual language. But it's long, and it's long. And I said, why is that opening pan so long? Because it takes a long time to get to the story. And they pointed at the guy and they said, "See Toshi over there? He spent a lot of time on that background. So we want to make sure it got shown to its best advantage." And I'm
Yeah.
like, but it's not moving the episode of the story forward. And they just went, he spent a lot of time on it.
Yeah.
So and I think some of that, and that's that's just a different style of storytelling. But I think that's infected American stuff a lot without having Toshi, who spends a lot of time on the background to make it work. So what motivates a pan or something like that for you guys? What makes you want to use that?
I think you use the word that I always think of, motivate. Like why, like every camera, back when we first started, every camera movement, every cut cost money.
Right.
Every change of background, every cut, every time you had a certain, like I was like, when we first started doing stuff, I was given like, you get this many cuts. And so that's how much money you have to spend on stuff. So the pan, you can get away with not cutting if you stay in that shot.
Right.
And it's easy, especially if you're panning over, like we used to always do it more like if there was a crowd scene, right? You'd have like here's the crowd scene, so you get to see and like you would fake people thinking there was animation happening with sound effects and maybe something happening in the foreground. So
I definitely feel like I've worked for directors that had that attitude of that sort of said like, look, when you start a shot, it's like you should stay on the shot you're in until like the story forces you to cut, or to move the camera. Like if you can keep staying on the shot that you're on, there definitely I've heard some directors be like, you absolutely should. And to Jeff's point, I mean, I think when I first started working at Sony, there was a producer that not only were we limited to the amount of cuts that we could do, but you weren't allowed to pan. Actually, I think there was a period of a couple of years at, I will say, the studio, like at Sony, when Sony was first starting out, where it was like you couldn't pan. So it was like because I don't know if like the producer that was in charge had just fallen out of love with pans or felt people relied on them too much or whatever. But so he just came up with this blanket statement of no pans.
Chews up a lot of background designer time.
yes, it does for sure. Scott is drawing. That's a pan going from left to right.
And that's a truck in.
That's a truck in. or a dolly in. I just always called it pushing in.
Not a zoom.
Or it could be a zoom.
Well, I mean,
You have to call it.
Yeah.
And what would the difference be?
Well, one, the zoom would be the camera just zooms in, and the dolly or truck in is the whole camera itself moves in.
Right, but animation, did you actually do that?
Well, we were all digital by the time Batman Beyond came along. When you shoot on a flatbed, it makes a difference because of the background. You know, the more you zoom in, the more any little problem in the background will show up. And if
there was only a ratio that you could zoom in at maximum, right? It was like a third, something
like that.
Yeah, at some point the background would look wonky. But doing digital, when we were doing CG, like when I first started doing CG cartoons, the game we would play was how long can you stay in the storytelling without cutting. So you would have the camera move from like a wide shot, you would have the camera move into the necessary close up, then rotate to the 2 shot, then maybe slide up to show someone walk, like, or go down about close to whatever was on the table that needed to be seen, and then roll up so you could see the reaction of. So whatever, if you could keep the camera without cutting, the idea was that you stayed in the shot, you stayed in the moment.
Say you're in a Justice League or Transformers fight scene, and characters are fighting, in one area, and then, say someone like. And then you could just have another group of characters like fight their way in front of the characters that were fighting. So you don't have a cut, and then you might pan with them, and then that action's happening over there. And then, someone gets knocked out of camera into there's all these different ways that you can kind of keep things. You can keep it so that it's not the things in the camera can make things that are not static. Even if your camera is static,
Right.
So what's this?
You just do that really well.
What's that one? Hang on a second, Scott.
That's panning. If it's all in the same.
Is it still
shot.
panning?
Yeah.
Well, that could also be racking focus. If this guy is in focus in the front, and then you rack focus to see that guy in the back, and he's blurry in the front now.
But you're going to need number 2 in there. In the first one. I'm sorry, Steve.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like you wouldn't.
Right. Like this is one whole drawing.
Right.
Yeah.
Do something to connect them.
Yeah. It takes a long time. Well, to answer your question, Sean, I think for me it was always the motivating move would be either like something has changed in this scene, I need to show new information, or we're following this person into a new environment, right? Like the situation might be the same, but the location has changed. And so I always try to make sure that if something was happening off screen, that he would turn and then I would cut to show what was off screen. So like the movement was motivated for the viewer. Or like say if he needed to check his watch, like he would start to do this and then I would cut into the watch, to the inset of the watch, just to try and be as economical and quick as possible. But I mean, that's where you really get into storytelling style. Like Miyazaki likes to hold on stuff for a really long time. And so you get a real sense of the characters interacting with the environment. Like there's that great scene in Spirited Away we just watched where she goes in to see the Boiler Man, and like she kicks off her little shoes. Like he takes the time to show her like kicking off her little shoes, and you really feel like, oh, this is like a little girl in a Japanese house, like trying to be polite. It's just that kind of moment. I don't even I hardly ever have time for that kind of moment.
Right.
But it is a function of genre too. It's a function of genre too. Like Miyazaki and like Castle of Cagliostro, there is a lot more cutting because it's ostensibly like an action comedy in the way that Kiki's Delivery or Spirited Away or even Sherlock Hound is a TV show. So the episodes are much shorter and there's a lot more action, and so he doesn't have that same kind of like lyrical relationship to time because the pressures of that genre created.
Right.
So just kind of adding on to your point, Jeff, of like a lot of it depends on the genre of the show or movie that you're doing. Like it will allow for, will heavily influence how much you cut or pan or.
Right.
So with some of those examples you talked about, what would be a moment where you would rather pan to show the watch or pan to show the person they're looking at rather than cut to it, like cut to an over the shoulder shot? Well,
cutting is obviously fast and panning is slow. But there's something to be said about, like, say characters are talking about something and then like you could use the pan quickly if it's like, if someone like suddenly mentions something and it's been in the shot and it's information that we're aware of, but you never really paid attention to it. So then you could like quickly pan over to reveal, the can of soda that's been poisoned on the shelf or something like that. And if you're going to do a slower pan, then that means you're not trying to reveal the information as quickly as a cut reveals the information instantaneously, and a quick pan does it nearly, so.
I think, Steve, that's a great point, Steve. Like if I wanted to show you something, but I didn't necessarily want to bring your attention to it, I would pan over it while following someone having a conversation or something. But if like say Chekhov's gun is on the mantle, we'll pan past it if we want you to see it, but we don't want you to think about it yet. Or if we cut right to it, you're gonna be like, oh shit, the gun's about to be important. Yeah. So it's a sense of eminence, I think.
I'm enough of a nerd that I didn't realize you were speaking about Anton Chekhov at first. I thought you were referring to Ensign Chekhov.
Chekhov's phaser is a famous dramatic moment. Do you ever do any camera movement just because you think it looks cool? Because frankly, I see a lot of that in animation and television and movie making these days, and it makes me crazy.
I never did any camera movement that I felt absolutely necessary, because I was always told just how costly it always was.
It's tough that the influence of Japanese storytelling is big. And look, and there's something to Toshi put a lot of work into this background, because there's a lot of Japanese animation of certain eras that's kind of about, trying to get as much bang for your buck as possible. And when everything's when all the jobs are being done in the same place, right? Like, we're spoiled because we've mostly worked in American pre-production where the animation is done overseas. But in a lot of the Japanese studios that you talked, like when TMS is not doing what they'd call, service work or contract work, or, when they're doing their own thing, it'd be more like Jeff's experience in CrossGen, where, you're storyboarding it next to the guy who's going to animate it. Or you, the animator, might even be storyboarding something if you've got that skill set too. So you get like super duper less detailed storyboards that, but so sometimes it's about like how many slope, like I feel like a very common Japanese technique. I'm thinking of like in Gainax, the studio that's evolved into Trigger, when they made like Evangelion or something like that, right? Like, they're trying to save all of their animation for when they're going to have the two robots beating the hell out of each other, right? So, So then they're trying to handle everything else as efficiently as possible,
right,
and as inexpensively and as labor saving as possible. And so, having one background artist draw a really nice detailed background that your eye can really linger on, while you slowly pan over that background while you're hearing two characters having a conversation. Like you might have started on a two shot of the two characters and they're talking to each other. Then maybe you have an OTS of one and the OTS of the other. and then maybe you cut wide again in a shot where they're in the background, and then you might just drift off them while we hear them have the conversation in a Japanese cartoon. I feel like that's my experience of that is a very Japanese animated thing. I can't think of a lot of times I've seen that in, say, an American television show. Let's just pan off of David Hasselhoff and Kit, and we'll just pan
We'll hear his voice.
Right. Marvel TV cartoons. I haven't watched them in a few years, but they were getting to a lot of that. And I'll tell you, I would not have asked that question about the pan if it wasn't the first shot in the show. If it wasn't starting the show. If it had come later in the show and there was just a long pan, I would have accepted it. But for the beginning, it really didn't make much sense to me.
Well, and there's,
but
I think,
go on.
No, or just, I mean, and I remember, so many guys that we knew that had come over from Asia and worked in our part of the industry. So they started.
That's a zoom out, Scott, or a truck out. Yeah.
They'd been on the front lines animating in Asia before they came over, and you had guys from Japan, guys from Korea, guy from the Philippines, and I one director I remember this incredibly talented guy, Sean Song. I don't know if you ever worked with him, Sean.
Oh yeah,
but
I met him. I think.
And I remember, I think I was working on an episode of the Boondocks or something, but I remember that I'd storyboarded this sequence where I forget the names of the two young kids now. Huey was one of them, I think. They were on like
Huey
a bus
and Riley.
or something. They were on a bus, and I think I'd done something where it was like, kind of banana pan-ish. Okay, so I guess we should explain what we're talking about.
What's banana pan?
A banana pan.
Do we slip?
No, a banana pan. It's shaped, when you draw it, it's shaped like a banana.
Jeff should be, yeah. It's basically, it's like, if you're starting on to the left and panning to the right, it's like, how do you describe it?
I'll draw
the
it.
objects.
It's a curve. It's a curved pan.
Yeah.
You start from
Exactly.
the bottom.
So it'd be like if a car's coming and you're seeing the car drive by the camera, it's like if you're seeing like a car is driving toward the camera, and then it drives by the camera, and then it drives away from the camera. That would be done.
And you pan up like a little bit to get the license plate.
But you would have to. And the bad thing about that shot I just described is you'll have to be animating that car as it travels in perspective.
I was about to say that's one of the difficult ones because you're shooting for trying to get real power and perspective.
Yeah. So if you're not the Walt Disney Corporation using an actually incredibly cool cardboard car.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff.
Right. So the car comes, we see it, it goes by us, and the camera goes past. So the frame gets bigger and then it goes back small.
Right.
Yeah.
So in the days of 2D, like in 101 Dalmatians, right? Like they actually built Cruella's car as a model. And then they would, and then they could,
rotoscope it.
Essentially rotoscope it.
Right.
And then, then when you started being able, even in a 2D show, didn't Robert Fletcher build Terry McGinnis's Batmobile in CG? So that
starting with Batman Beyond, just about all of our vehicles were built in CG, so that we could do that kind of stuff, and then they were cell shaded.
What a great design Fletcher did for that. I don't think there's ever enough toys made of that particular car.
Yeah, Batman Beyond was a great show.
So the dirty secret of vehicle and headquarters toys, I remember one of the Mattel guys telling me this when we moved over there, is that they always want a vehicle. Every toy line needs a vehicle. That's why Superman had a car.
Right. Spider-Man had a car.
Yeah, Superman, the animated series. But the vehicles and the headquarters, like the Justice League satellite thing, they never sell that well because they're so expensive and so big. So, it's a weird sort of like, we need this, but it'll never sell. Yeah, but we need it.
So typical.
Yeah.
One of the words I hate the most that I've heard in the last 20 years that became part of my lexicon in life was toyetic.
I knew that was coming. As soon as you said one of the words I hate,
that word so much.
Oh,
It's
so
very
anyway, I
bad.
bring up Banana Pan, Sean Song. So I think, Huey and Riley were supposed to be driving somewhere on a bus, and I had, of course, put in a expensive and difficult to shoot Banana Pan, of them going the bus coming by the bus, and I'll have to hold. And then Sean just did such a great, like, very Japanese animated influence thing of, and I was like, oh man, I wish I could work with this guy more and learn from him. It was like, all right, let's see if I will use. So we've got.
I like the background music, Steve.
Yeah.
Can you hear my daughter going la 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 la?
I
Totally.
I hope it's your daughter.
Sure.
Well,
Either that or
I don't know.
I gotta go check.
It's
on
just a podcast he listens to all day.
There's so many who can keep track of them. But 1, 2, 3. All right. Da da da. If someone wants to sing the dating,
Well,
What's
what
this
I was
guy
going
you
to
put
say
up?
was a similar thing for a comic book. You might have a horizontal panel, which could be in animation terms, like you'd start on this side,
right,
and then you
right.
would have passed through this side as the car was going by,
Right.
and doing all that stuff. I do it in comic books because it allows for more time to take, and then different word balloons or different things can take up time and space as you read from left to right. But it would serve a completely different purpose, almost in animation.
I was thinking
This-
earlier when
this
we were
is
talking
just-
about that Adams and Stranko used to do panel layouts that sort of aped what camera movements do, and they got the
Yeah.
other people too.
All right,
So here's so when
Steve, sorry.
So when I turned in my Banana Pan, then this is what Sean Song corrected me to. So it's like we're just looking at, like, there's the foreground layer of the road, and then there was actually there's a distant beachy layer that I didn't draw. Then a truck the bus starts to come up over kind of this
Right.
hump in the road. We see it. There's some smoke as well. Then it achieves, like, being on the top layer of that layer. Then it breaks the line and starts overlapping to come toward us. And so with this minimal amount of smoke and different stuff, you're never changing the perspective on the
Right,
bus.
right.
This is a million times more easier, shot to animate.
Right.
And if done well, it's really cool. Plus, just like that, you can have a ton of dialogue over this shot if they're sitting on the bus and we're hearing them, if we know they're already on the bus and then we're just hearing their voices over this shot. And so
Right.
that was
what's that shot called again?
I have no idea I don't know if this shot has an official name, but I do.
Henry.
But I've
we call it Henry.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's
But I've
cheap.
definitely seen it. I've seen it a ton in Japanese animated, because it's
Yeah.
just such a great time saver. But like all great time savers, you want it to be something where, and that's the thing about why, if you're going to stay on a background for a long time, it's got to be a really nicely drawn background, so
Right.
that then
Now,
you just feel like, ooh, isn't that pretty,
Steve, do you
But
think that
sometimes you
serves
would
the
choose to do
story?
that, right? You would choose to not change things. Sorry, Sean. You choose to
Yeah.
not change all the things around you, or not move in and out, or do those other things, because then you want your character just to act. And you might do those panels then where the hand gestures and the this and the that, and you indicate that they're really mad about something or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, though you'll find, like, again, you'll find that there, a lot of Japanese cartoons, it's very, I mean, this is somewhat cultural about the Japanese as well, but like there tends to not be a lot of big over exaggerated acting
Right.
and movement and stuff. And then they have a much broader range of, like, almost emotional icons, like emotional
Yeah.
iconography that stand in for, like, okay, my character is feeling very lusty and horny and lustful. Blood bursts out of the nose, or the the little
The X
symbol
on the forehead.
Mhm.
it's a throbbing vein on the forehead, but
Or the
even
giant
sorry.
teardrop.
Yeah.
that becomes, because that ultimately is easier than animating, like realistic
Yep.
realistic acting stuff too, if it just sort of becomes this iconography for emotion.
Well, also that's one of the benefits of animation, that it doesn't have to be realistic all the time.
Right.
That's,
No.
I think we've got starting from my generation and on, we've got people who are just way too focused on what's realistic.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's making things more realism. I think has really done a number on comics in general. But then also one of the things, like, I love Fooly Cooley. I love Teen Titans back in the day. Like, so it definitely it was a great cartoon, because a lot of times it would push the boundaries of what was, I mean, it was a cartoon, so you could draw all kinds of different things.
Yeah. Yeah, that was what Glenn wanted when we first started talking about doing Teen Titans. Was he wanted a show that was more focused on emotion than on plot, and using the techniques. Furikuri in particular was what we watched tons of when we were developing that show.
Right. Yeah. But I do think that it's one of the things that's trippy, that it takes a while to I think, to get a handle on moving the camera around, unlike comics, because you have all the same camera movements that are possible in comics, but you don't have the sense of motion. You teleport as opposed to drive. And so one of the things I struggled with coming from comics was I wanted to teleport people from moment to moment. And it took me a while to figure out how to get the driving steps in. Like, I can't go all the way to here. I need to stop along the way, get some gas, have a sandwich, hang out for a little while, whatever, so that the trip was smooth and interesting. That took me a long time to get a handle on.
And a lot of writers have a hard time going to comics and getting that spot by spot storytelling, as opposed to saying, he walks in the room and panel 2-1, he walks in the room, sits down, picks up a pencil, and drinks his coffee. I've seen a lot of that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because comics are cutting so much, though. Again, it's all about, it's space and time, right? Like in comics, because you can always cut. So you're really working around like, well, how much dialogue has this writer written? Like if you're getting a full script, that's a huge thing of like, well, geez, I guess I have to pick this one shot where the character's only like on the bottom third of the panel, because I need 2/3 of this panel space,
right,
where the writer's just written like these 2 long paragraphs or something. But then at the same time, I feel like in comics, you could probably just jump right into a scene more and start thumbnailing it right away. Whereas I probably wouldn't, but you could. But I feel like in a film or for animation, I feel like you've got to read the scene a couple of times before you even start thumbnailing it, because there's so often you have to reverse engineer stuff in it, when you're dealing with moving, whether it be real actors or whether it be, like I remember I had like this 9-person conversation scene in Stretch Armstrong, I think, or something.
Oh, and that's a lot of people jibber jabbing.
Yeah.
And I had just come off of Transformers: Robots in Disguise, where and I came in on their 3rd and 4th season, so they already had a zillion assets, and it was as we have aforementioned, Vince Toyama background lead. So, you never wanted for anything when you're doing all these shots and scenes. And I remember it's the first time where I realized, I'm like, I actually had to teach myself a little bit of SketchUp, because I'm like, I actually think I need to build the background in, a CG background for this conversation scene, just so I can track exactly where all 9 of my people are going to be, But then given what the dialogue was and what like certain people needed to cross at certain points and say stuff, so it really turned into this whole, there was an enormous amount of like choreography, and I think I remember I had one director I work with sometimes where I felt like right when you're first showing them your stuff, they might have a tendency to want to like immediately start doing notes. And I would always be like, could you please just watch the whole thing
Right.
first?
Right.
Because if you're like, oh, I want Larry to be standing in the scene instead of sitting, and you're like, okay, look, I actually have him stand after about 40 seconds. You know, like if you start redrawing one thing and changing it now, it's going to domino effect where we're going to have to just change the entire scene.
Right.
And maybe that is what you want to do, but could you hold off and see? Chris Berkeley's a director that I've known since I very first got into animation. And something I always appreciate about Chris, it was a little bit weird, you had to get used to it. It's like Chris would just sit with your stuff so much the whole time. So you're just sitting there in a meeting when you're pitching your stuff to him, and like nothing is said for like 30 or 40 minutes because he's just like reading your stuff and kind of going through it and seeing if it works. But then I was like, but at least he is. At least he's not like he's really waiting before he makes any notes to see, does this all play? What works? What doesn't work? You know,
that's uncomfortable.
Talking about the 9-character thing, I am continually surprised at how many writers in TV and film, and especially in animation, have no clue about how to tell a story visually or about how things work. Like, you know, if I write a scene with 9 people talking, that's going to be a pain in the ass for somebody down the line. Or crowd scenes. We used to always have the crowd scene conversations.
Right. Well, because you not only have done animation and comics and written for both, you also do live action and direct actual people in a room where you have to move. The thing about moving the camera for comics and animation is the camera it's virtual, it's imaginary. But like when you're shooting for real people, that's equipment that you have to physically move, and it's heavy, and I think it's really great training actually, doing short films and little films for being a good storyteller, because you get the sense of space in a way I think you don't get from just doing comics.
Well, and that it's collaboration. You know, you're not just writing something that is going to magically come. Somebody's going to have to do the work. On Twilight, I kept trying to have them stop resetting up the lights for every change in shot because I wanted it to be a grounded superhero thing. So just if shadows are falling, shadows are falling. That's
right.
That's it. You know, it doesn't have to look perfect.
Well, and Sean, you actually started in theater, so it's like, you know, that's a really great first thing, because like what you might have 9 or 10 or 12 people on stage for one kind of scene or something like that, and you've got to find a way to tell the story and also create a pleasing picture for the audience too. It can't just be like you're looking at a random bus station with 12 people positioned in however.
And you've got to figure out how these people get on and get off, not just onto the stage, but the actual mechanics backstage of people passing each other and getting costumes changed and stuff like that. I had not long ago, I did a play, and I had a director who was exactly what you guys are talking about on Transformers, where they would stop, you know, after like a week of rehearsals, I want to run the scene so that I know what my character is and I know what my character is doing. And if I get stopped constantly, I've got no chance to get momentum going in the scene. So it's much like that, you know. And when I rehearse actors for movies, I prefer to give them as much time as possible and then move the camera later. Let them play the damn scene. That's the most important thing. It's not, you know, a pretty picture of where you put your camera. The scene is the most important thing. That's a great shot, that huge Dr. Fate.
That's awesome. Hey, Scott, can you go back a second? Because there was a page on there that that has look at all the dialogue, right? Like I'm sure the dialogue is great, but the first thing I see it feels daunting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Keith was still dialoguing at this point, and he usually didn't, but this one, there was a lot of stuff he wanted to get across in a short amount of time, which just goes along. But it was funny when Jones mentioned that earlier. I talk to other writers sometimes, either ones that are handing me Marvel plot, like Chuck Dixon on the Hawkeye miniseries. I asked him when we were talking about it because he didn't give out dialogue. I'm like, well, I haven't worked plot. How much room do you need or whatnot? And he just said in general, go, give me a third of a panel. Always try and give me about a third of a panel.
Yeah.
I mean, okay. But in this case, yeah, this one was a rare one for Keith that he did more. But later on in this series, DeMatteis took over as the scripter, the dialoguer. And I knew with him after an issue 2 of working with him going, he needs like at least a half a panel on everything that I'm doing on. Because see, Keith would do this a lot of other times too. There'd be almost no dialogue.
Right.
Right.
So it would jump around a little bit. And I forget if I think he might have handed me a full script. That's why I did leave a lot of room on the top of those panels.
Keith
But other places I had full reign.
Keith is someone who, in his layouts, Keith Giffen,
Yeah.
Keith Giffen and Bill Morrison, to me, are the people who can best mimic cinematic storytelling on a comic book page.
Mm-hmm.
I think Giffen just did it naturally, and I think Morrison, coming from a lot of storyboarding, did it. But like the way those panels on the bottom there play through, that feels very cinematic to me.
Yep, very much so. And also to go along with what Steve was saying before about that editorial process of like, you need to sit through a scene of how somebody storyboarded it or something like that to understand it. I don't, when I hand in pages for a comic book, I don't hand in one page at a time, because the editor themselves would be lost going like, okay, yeah, it's okay, but I don't know where the last panel goes off to the next page,
Right.
and how is the rest of this going to play out and whatever else going on. So early on in my career, I started handing in pages, at least like 5 pages at a shot. But there were times later on where I handed in like 11 pages or a whole half an issue at a shot, just so you can see what's going on, see what the feel is, see what I'm building to, or
Right.
whatever else I might be doing.
Oh,
Were
great
there
stuff.
editors who resisted that and wanted to see page by page?
No,
Good.
Well,
no,
that's
never.
that's a really great bit of advice that Scott gave me early on. I remember when I had been working in animation again for a while, and I was sort of trying to do some comic book stuff on my own, I think. And because I was so busy drawing cartoons that I would sometimes only be able to do like a panel at a time on the comic I was working on, and then I'd be really excited wanting to show my friends. So I'd like show it, panel by panel, and then I'd get frustrated that some of my friends were like, nitpicking panel by panel, and then Scott was like, look, dude, they're just going off the information you have. Like you need to hold back and wait until you've got full page or full pages, and then send stuff, because otherwise,
Yep.
It'd be like if you're watching a scene from a movie and you're just seeing it a shot at a time. You're like, well, what's happening? What's the context? What
Right.
all the things exist in a relationship with one another.
Well,
Yep.
I mean, to go back to an earlier question, Sean, about like why do you use a pan? What motivates the pan or any kind of camera movement at all? I definitely think what you're doing is you're building a relationship between the shots. So like if you're doing a 2-shot where people are talking to each other and they have that same level and their eye level and they're equally spaced from each other, I always think of it as like that power dynamic is equal. And then depending on who is going to be taking charge of that scene or who is the aggressor in that scene or whatever, I will shift to put the aggressor closer to the foreground so that or even raise them up a little bit so that they have more power. So that's just that's a rotating camera movement, right? So now I'm over the shoulder looking down at the person who doesn't have the same power. And then instead of shooting all the way over to do their OTS shot, you cut in first to a close-up so that the camera doesn't jump for the reader. So like I've covered that space in between, and now I'm next to that person's face. They're having reaction. Then I can switch to the OTS whenever you try and so like the shots kind of have a rhythm that makes sense together, kind of like a vocabulary to make up words. Oh, that's cool, Scott. What is that?
This is
It's Schenk, isn't it?
Strange.
Oh,
Yeah.
Schenk. Yeah, nice. Yeah, Schenk's a great storyteller. Well, he did storyboards for a long time. He worked on Batman Beyond. Yeah. So his storytelling is, even in his comic books, it's very cinematic.
I think we used him on Justice League too.
Yeah.
Well, Chris,
He did a lot of video game stuff for a long time, so he's really great about different ways to tell the story.
But I even feel like going back to before Chris ever worked in animation, I always just thought his thumbnails and layouts were, I can remember there being like Jeff working on a Wonder Man page, or like it was like a 2-page spread. It might have been a shot where it was like a 2-page spread that was, Jeff likes to do often a shot, I think that's really cool in a 2-page spread, where Jeff will have the 2-page spread be a long panel across the top of both, and then a series of panels across the bottom. So you get a little bit of 2-page spread and a little bit of storytelling. And I think maybe Chris had helped out on some of that layout on the bottom panels, and Chris just had an interesting way of like using the space, kind of like, say, I had to, until that shot I showed earlier, I never think about like bending the ground. Like when I think about the ground plane, my first thought is to always go like, oh, well, it's, it's like we're in a perspective book. It's a flat shot. The earth is flat, and and there's a vanishing point, and everything goes directly to the vanishing point. And I think Chris had come up with a shot that was kind of like this, Jeff. I feel like it was like maybe there was a lot of ground in the shot, and then it wasn't quite like a cute, like sort of car coming over the top of a shot type, but it was something.
Okay.
It was something kind of like that, and I felt like that was a shot that was very much not in either your or my like mental, vocabulary at that point, where and Chris was really good at leading the eye, and using and varying the size of things in panels, and using like background objects and different stuff in panels to kind of move you along. Like he like probably a great world would have been a world where Chris just laid out all of our comics in our comic.
That would have been awesome. I would have loved that.
And we just,
well, it is
we
kind
just
of,
got, yeah.
It is kind of funny.
You do the thinking. We'll make the drawings pretty. You give.
We'll do the easy part.
You do all the thinking.
I do think that it is one of the things that you can really tell an artist by, especially when especially boards. Like I can tell when Joaquim's boarded a section, or when our friend Chris Copeland is boarded, you can see, you're like, oh, this is his rhythm. This is how he combines these shots. This is how he gets in. Like we all have, and I think it's probably from watching a lot of like Spielberg early on, or watching a lot of anime or old cartoons. Or you really have like, oh, this is like one of my go-to tricks is you open a scene if someone's driving somewhere close on the tire. So it's just spinning wheel. And so you're like, oh, what's going on? So you start with some movement, and you establish that they're on the road. And then you can cut to inside the car without really showing the car or the road or whatever. It's just a quick, easy way.
And it's easy to animate, and it's easy to draw. It's easy to design.
Yeah. And it looks cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about that. I love starting on a close-up or a series of close-ups to sort of set the scene. I think I talked about that before when we were talking about Goodfellas, where and then you might have dialogue over that or something in case you have a little bit of cushion in your dialogue before you're getting right into like the most important thing. And I feel like then it immediately can kind of engage your watcher so that they're like, wait, what? All right, I'm getting information. So I'm seeing a pastrami sandwich. I'm seeing
right. I'm seeing the old pastrami opening works every time.
I'm seeing a poodle. I'm seeing a Coca-Cola. I don't know how these all relate. And then you cut wide and you establish everything, and then all those things that were in, the close-ups you see. You're like, oh, right.
You're building tension and stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Batman's eating a pastrami sandwich.
Right. Well, every combination of shots is kind of a mystery to be solved, right? Like you're it's not like that one. Oh, Batman in the sandwich.
Well, no, because Batman's really more of a corned beef guy, but
he really is.
I understand the concept. I understand the concept for the purpose of illustration.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, well, like there's definitely two shots right there, Scott. One of the things that I like to do is fake movement, fake like, oh, the flow of the waterfall is going down, so it leads the eye down. And the next one, it's from the clouds coming. All
Up.
the stuff points down towards the arrow, basically, of them going along that path.
Right.
So much of comics is trying to create movement when we don't have any movement. Whereas
Yeah.
where you guys in animation,
Right.
you guys have movement all the time.
Yeah, it
And
is
sound.
the
Well,
big
with-
difference. Yeah, there's that classic, like they're walking across the thing. Yeah.
When we
Or
were at
you're-
Warner's, there was a ban on holds for a while. I don't know if you guys knew that, but especially on the Animaniacs and Pinky and the Brain shows, no holds ever.
What's
For
a
anything.
hold? Like you
Hold
wouldn't
is when
hold
you-
on a shot?
No, you don't hold, or you had, when you'd watch the old Looney Tunes, they do a hold, and Bugs Bunny would just be there going, and there'd be the dink, dink, dink
Right,
with his eyes,
right.
like that.
Yeah.
No, none of that.
Why? There was
Because
one
somebody
of the
decided that
directors-
gorillas sell comic books, so you put that on the cover.
right.
Everything was
the
also 3/4 in, 3/4 out, because all Hanna-Barbera was only just left, right.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's the that's the shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Well, one of the things I guess we should leave. Like one of the things I always loved is some of the phrasing. It was like, oh, when you have two people facing each other, but they're not really facing each other, they're both kind of 3/4 out, so that we can see the characters
Cheat.
and it's easier to animate.
They're cheating
We just
out.
always you're cheating it out, cheating out. Yeah,
That's from
Because, I mean,
stage.
that comes
That's
that comes from the theater too, right? You don't want people
Yeah.
upstaging each other, and
right.
I mean, it's so funny. You don't realize how ingrained all this stuff becomes when you are lucky enough to tell stories for a living. Like I think I saw my eldest daughter in a play a couple years ago, and I was so frustrated by the teacher because I'm like, okay, they've done this great job, but then she is not drilled. Like everyone's upstaging each other. She is not. It's like, look, all the conversations at the very least have to just happen. Like we should be looking at two profiles, worst case scenario.
Right.
But and you would prefer to do what Jeff's saying is like where you actually cheat a bit or something like that. But
Yeah.
she just allowed everyone was just, they were just cheating to be like this. So it's like what,
Oh,
so it's like you have one person's back to all the, it's like, no, you need to rotate. How have you allowed this to happen?
Yeah.
Every middle school and high school performance, I had to be restrained from going backstage.
Start whacking heads. God damn it.
What are you people doing?
Yeah.
The only I was at one. It was my second child was playing the violin, so it was a concert, and the only other parent who ever agreed with me was when they announced the Williamsville East Jazz Ensemble, and they rolled out two big conga drums, and she just turned to me and said, "This is going to hurt."
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot of like, oh yeah, that's the sketch cover I did for Scott.
woohoo!
Yeah.
You're a good drawer.
Sometimes. Not
Jeff
today.
draws good. Jeff draws particularly good with a ballpoint pen.
Yeah. That is my weapon of choice.
Yep.
Well, I mean, I think we talked about pans and animation and stuff. I thought that was interesting.
I did too. I liked
Oh.
it.
Yeah, I do think though it is one of those things that until I know that a lot of comic book artists and animators and storyboard artists have the concept that they're going to cross over and just do comics or just do animation and and I do think that those are definitely possibilities. Jones and I have both done it. Dave Johnson has done it. Eric Canetti has done it. I mean, people have done it.
Brandon McKinney, Chris Shank.
Brandon McKinney, Chris Shank. So it is possible. I do think, though, that they're deceptively similar. I do think that it takes a long time to transition back and forth to learn the different kinds of skill, because I think it's easy to get them confused and be like, oh, because I stopped reading comics when I first started doing storyboards because I kept doing comic book shots and they kept looking terrible, right? I think they look cool on paper, but then on the screen, there's something about them that seemed wonky. So I
Right.
really had to start studying. Yeah. And it was because the way I was framing stuff and the way the characters moved, it didn't fit. So it took me a long time to figure out how to do it.
About 4 years, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I mean, what's funny about that Sean prediction is he was dead on. Like he knew exactly how long it was. So I basically went to college.
Well, I remember.
Well, it's basically kind of what it was for us in comics too. I think it was like a 4 to 6 year whatever thing of like actually becoming comfortable being handed just about any script and going like,
Right.
okay, yep, I know what to do.
Yeah. I can decipher this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jones, you were saying?
Oh, yes. I mean, I think I was there, so I remember you hearing that first prediction and being like, "Fuck that," and then 4 years later, you're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, maybe."
I 100% thought, I'm like, nah, I know what I'm doing. Nope. He was dead right. It took me 4 years.
4 years later.
Yeah. All right, fellas.
All right. Another good
Well,
one. Thank you, everyone.
That was fun. That was good time. So we will see everyone next week. And we'll talk about something else that's fun.
For us.
Fare thee well.
Oh, God.